They say people judge a book by its cover, and most days you learn to live with that, you shrug, you move on. But every so often somebody decides your cover deserves to be torn, and that's when things get interesting. This is one of those days. My name is Maya Carter, and this is the story of the day a man who thought money made him a monarch tried to steal more than a seat. He tried to steal my dignity, and he picked the wrong woman to test. I was exhausted, bone-deep tired in a way that only months of sleep-deprived business travel can make you so. I dressed like a ghost, an oversized hoodie, soft leggings, beat-up sneakers. I wanted invisible. That hoodie hid a suit no one would ever guess I owned it. Hid a company that moved boxes and ideas across the globe, and it hid a roster of people who depended on me not to make a scene. I stepped onto the tarmac at Ridgeway Private, the kind of little airport where the coffee is weak and the leather is too soft, and I wanted one thing. A quiet flight, a glass of scotch, 10 hours of blackout sleep before another boardroom interrogation. Seat 1A had been mine for years, the forward single seat, the one with the view of the cockpit door, the one that felt like a little island of peace. I dropped into it, kicked off my sneakers, wrapped the hoodie tight, and took that first slow sip that tastes like permission to relax. The cabin smelled of mahogany and leather, and something that always reads as prestige. I closed my eyes. Then he walked in tall. Loud, the kind of man whose next breath takes 3 square inches of air from the room. He was not subtle. He wore a suit that wanted to be admired, a watch that flashed like a taunt, and a self-confidence so heavy it had its own gravity. He carried his entitlement like a carry-on. He was supposed to be a seatmate, a charter passenger, a name on a sheet, but he moved through the cabin like he owned the sky. He came straight to me, didn't look at my face, only my spot. "You're in my seat," he said like he was delivering a verdict. Not a question, a sentence. "Excuse me," I answered soft because I was tired. "This is 1A. He smirked, the kind of smirk that tells you he believes social hierarchy is a law of nature. "I paid for that seat," he said, voice rising, chest puffing. "You need to get up and move to the back. Now. There's a particular hum, a small electric charge that runs along your skin when you're being sized up as lesser. You can feel it in your throat, that exact moment where you either swallow or spit. I didn't want to cause a scene. I'd been in too many headlines to know the price of attention, but I also wasn't going to let someone treat me like I belonged on a shelf. "There are other seats," I said, honest and clipped. He laughed at me loud and mean. "Other seats aren't 1A, he replied. "Other seats aren't worth what I paid. Do you understand?" He leaned in, invading my space, the air between us suddenly a court where he was judge. "Move, sweetheart," he said, like it was a favor. He didn't see a CEO or a board member or a person with any worth beyond a momentary convenience. He saw a hoodie, and he saw weakness, and he wanted to test the boundaries. You know what I mean? Yeah, that happened. I stood up, not to escalate, but to keep the peace I thought I wanted. I packed my bag, an old, scuffed leather tote that looked thrift store worn and meant more to me than the number of zeros on his bank statement, and I walked past him. He smiled like a kid who'd swiped someone's lunch money and thought he'd won. I sat in the back near the lavatory and told myself it was fine. Sleep was more valuable than pride. 2 hours in Overflat, Nebraska. I dozed half-sleep, the kind where you're there, but you're not, when his shadow fell across me. He had come back. Not for the restroom, not for anything honest. He kicked my bag, hard. It slid across the floor, slammed into the bathroom door. The sound split the air between humiliation and anger, and in that instant something inside me stopped asking permission. It tightened a wire ready to snap. He got loud, insulted the bag, the stitching, the softness, as if he could call a soul fake. His wife watched, eyes empty, the kind of woman who'd been trained to look away. I pulled the earbuds out. "What do you want?" I asked. He lied, said he needed to access the hold, that my bag was blocking him. He raised his voice. Got in my face. "You gotta understand your place," he sneered. I'd read that sentence in a million dismissive comments, felt it in 1,000 boardrooms, but on a plane at 30,000 feet it sounded smaller and meaner. I stood up, removed the hoodie not as theatrics, but because he needed to reconcile the picture he'd built in his head with reality. The hoodie came off, and for a heartbeat the cabin recalibrated the same woman in simpler clothes. Yes, but something else sat on her wrist. A watch that wasn't bragging, it was an announcement. He blinked like he'd swallowed something bitter. "Sit down," I said. Not a threat, not an apology, an order. He scoffed, tried to force the script he'd rehearsed, call the captain. Call security, call someone to prove he was right. He didn't know the protocol. He didn't know the signals that I was legally entitled to use. I pressed a button, a discrete owner priority signal, and watched the logic of his world begin to fold. It summons the cockpit. It brings the captain. Captain Reyes walked through the door with a calm that belonged to people who've landed things through worse weather than attitudes. He asked a single administrative question. "Is there a problem?" The man who'd been strutting minutes ago choked on the answer. I told the truth. I didn't feel safe he'd assaulted my property. He'd threatened the crew. The captain listened professional and quiet and made a call. The plane turned around. That's the pivot. The point where a tired decision becomes a principled one. For him, it meant panic. For me, it meant the fight was no longer mine alone. The crew had my back. He yelled about meetings and money and influence. The plane banked, the sky tugged, and gravity reminded him how small a human can feel. He was escorted to the back, the walk of shame stretching the cabin like an eternity. He sat there, strapped into the engine noise while we carried on me upstairs, him displaced. When the jet touched down back at Ridgeway Blue and red lights painted the tarmac. 2 officers, an agent, someone with a badge and a face that didn't take arrogance for an answer. They stepped up the steps like punctuation. He was asked to identify himself to explain what happened, and his words loud on the plane were suddenly fragile under scrutiny. The captain had filed a report, the crew had documented the assault, and the law had a clear line. He was cuffed in the rain, shouting about injustice, as the universe quietly noted the irony. But the story didn't end with handcuffs. People who get caught doing ugly things often try to rewrite history faster than the truth can catch up. He spun a tale in interviews, a narrative where he was the victim, where I was the villain, where his career would tumble unless the public believed him. He filed a lawsuit, dramatic and loud, the kind that looks dangerous in headlines. That was the second test. Could I stay quiet and let the lie become the story? Or would I use the evidence I had and swing the scales? I had the cabin's black box, more than flight data, a vanity system recorded audio and video for liability. It captured everything. His first loud entrance, the insult, the shove to the bag. His threats, my request for calm, the captain's intervention. I could have released it immediately and watched national outrage implode his life overnight. But there's a strategy to stopping a man who thinks chaos is his currency. I let him run, I let him lie. I let him build his narrative. He played the martyr on morning shows, he clicked send on his sympathetic emails, he prayed a public would choose him. Then came the deposition. He swore his version into the record, all bravado and righteous fury. I played the tape. The room went cold. His lawyers stopped moving, his voice crumbled, and the man who'd spent a life buying influence realized that recorded truth eats bravado for breakfast. The lawsuit collapsed. His company cut him loose. The charges, federal serious, moved in with their own weight. The same clips the tabloids used to glorify him were now the evidence of his wrongdoing, and the rest unfolded with the slow, inexorable justice of a well-documented fact. A year later, he had a new address, one marked by orange jumpsuits and chewing regret. His wife left. His assets were in court. He sent me a letter from a cell begging forgiveness in a handwriting that wanted to be forgiven more than it was honest. I shredded it in a moment that was not sweet. Justice is not revenge, I told myself. It's restoration of order when someone abused theirs. I kept the scuffed bag, the one he kicked, not as proof of victory, but as a talisman. It reminded me every time I touched its worn leather that dignity isn't a price tag, and sometimes the best answer to arrogance is a quiet, unstoppable record of truth. I still fly, still sit in 1A when I can. And when the cabin fills with the white noise of 1,000 small judgments, I remember how fragile entitlement really is. So, what would you do if someone tried to steal your dignity for sport? Would you stand your ground? Pick your battle record the moment, or walk away and tell yourself it wasn't worth it. Drop your thoughts below. Tell me about a time you were underestimated, how you fought back, or how you wish you had. Are we too quick to forgive the loud, or too slow to believe the quiet sound off the comment section is for the stories that don't make headlines but matter anyway? If this hit home, share, hit subscribe. If you want more stories where truth does the talking. And tell me who gets to decide what we owe each other in a world that confuses money with merit.